We've done a lot of learning this year with our grammar, and the big grammar question I always hear is, why does this matter, and where will I ever use this? So I'm going to show you how we incorporate your grammar into writing, and we're going to start by talking about varied sentence structure and why it matters, and we're going to be starting to apply a lot of this into your writing from this point forward. So I have a little quote here that kind of shows one of the problems that we've noticed in writing before we start talking about varied sentence structure, and it's the fact that sentences sound very choppy. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. So even though the vocabulary in there is nice, it kind of gets lost in the choppiness of the sentences. Now listen. I vary the sentence length, and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And I just labeled a couple of the varied sentences that we're going to start talking about here. This one has an adverb at the beginning of it. We've talked about using adverbs as transitions, and it shows how this paragraph connects to the one before it. We've also got over here a compound sentence using a comma conjunction. By just combining 2 short sentences, it's another easy way to make some fluency in your writing. And sometimes, when I'm certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say, listen to this, it is important. And I found this by Gary Provost. And this is just a good variety of short sentences here. We've got some now that we made into a more fluent paragraph by using short and choppy sentences. And if you're really careful and very much challenged, you can try writing a really long descriptive sentence here. We've got lots of commas in here separating our phrases and connecting some description together. So we're going to start about with some basics, and so you should have in front of you in your interactive notebook a flippable that has the varied sentences that we're going to be looking for. We glued them in already, and you're going to be taking your notes on top of the flap. We will be in class doing some practice underneath the flap, so make sure that all of your writing stays on top of the flap today. So the first type of sentence we really have talked about already. You've been asked to incorporate them into the last couple writings that we've done, and that is an introductory prepositional phrase. We started the year talking about prepositional phrases. The only difference now is that we're talking about putting them at the beginning of the sentence. So what do you look for? Well, the first thing that you should look for in the sentence is a preposition. Should be one of those words that we memorized at the beginning of the year. We've already talked about the formula for a prepositional phrase. It starts with a preposition, can have modifiers in it, but has to end with a noun or a pronoun. And the big rule here is that you can't have a verb in here. We've talked about some exceptions when we have a verb with an ing. That's okay, but we can't really have a subject and a verb together in there. And then we said if you put your prepositional phrase at the beginning of your sentence, it has to have a comma after it. And that's kind of how it sets itself off from the rest of the sentence. When we do this and we put an introductory prepositional phrase, we're using it as a transition. And it's helping us get beyond those transitions like first, then, next, which are fine, but as 7th graders we really want to progress our writing to something a little bit more descriptive and mature. So we'll see if you can catch my theme for today's sentences. Here's my example. After American Idol Season 7, comma, girl rocker Carly Smithson made it big with the band We Are the Fallen. If you've never heard of them, you really should go listen. So I've got my preposition here, after. American Idol Season 7 is my noun. I see no verbs in there, and so there's my prepositional phrase at the beginning. I put a comma here, and one of the things that we know about prepositional phrases is you could take them out, but they add a little bit more description to them. So on the top of your foldable, for the flap where it says introductory prepositional phrase, you should take these 4 notes. And what you might want to do is copy the beginning of this sentence. You don't need to copy the entire thing, but copy the introductory prepositional phrase, put the comma after it so you know what it should look like. If you need to pause this so that you can copy your notes down, that's one of the perks of using this as a screencast. So go ahead and pause it, and when you're ready to move on, you can go to the next type. And the next type is an introductory infinitive. And again, we've talked about these as we looked at prepositional phrases because they're often confused. So what do we look for? Well, the first thing we have to find in that sentence is the word to. We have to be careful because to is also a preposition. So how do we separate it from a prepositional phrase? Well, the formula for an infinitive is to plus a verb. To run, to play, to be, to go. So when we have to with a verb, we know we're looking at an infinitive. Just like introductory prepositional phrases, when we put these at the beginning of the sentence, we have to have a comma after them. Because again, they're separating the sentence, they're introducing the sentence. And if you read your sentences out loud, you'll hear that natural pause. Just like prepositional phrases, when we use them this way, we're using them as an infinitive. So now we've got 3 different ways that we can vary our transitions in addition to just varying our sentence structure. So my example is, to run more than a mile, Flyleaf is number 1 on my playlist. Now, my phrase here doesn't end till way over here, but if we look at the first word here, I've got to. After it, I don't have a noun, I have a verb, to run. Now I wouldn't say, to run, pause, more than a mile Flyleaf is number 1 on my playlist. That breaking, it doesn't end there. The phrasing is, to run more than a mile, Flyleaf is number 1 on my playlist. So again, on this flap, you should have copied your notes, and then I would just copy the beginning of this phrase up to the comma so you know what an introductory infinitive should look like. On to number 3, introductory adverb. Nothing new here. What are we looking for? One word. Adverbs, and just because we know that the English language has to be difficult, we have words and phrases that can be used as adverbs, but when we're looking for an introductory adverb for the purposes of our writing in class, we're looking for a one-word adverb. They answer the questions how, when, where, and to what extent. And many of them end in ly, but not all. Just like our prepositional phrases, we use a comma at the end of some of them, not all of them, and so it's kind of something that you need to listen for. It would not be something I would ever take an error, a mistake off of for you, or points off of for you, if you put a comma there and it wasn't needed, because again, it's setting itself off from the sentence, it's adding some variety to your writing, and so it's okay to put a comma there. The best rule is just to kind of read your writing out loud and listen to see if you have a pause there. And introductory adverbs definitely are used as transitions. So my example here is also Fireflight is one of my favorite girl rocker bands. Okay, some other common ones, and if you want to jot these down to remember them, a lot of the ones that I see you using are then, first, next, finally, but we can also have some more descriptive adverbs if you're describing movements slowly or quickly, fearfully. So those are adverbs, and they're also used as transitions because they're showing some kind of a connection to how your character's feeling or what it is that you're describing. The next type is probably the newest one that we've been talking about, but you have been required to put these into your last couple of writings, and that's a compound sentence with a comma and a conjunction. So what are we looking for? You need 2 complete sentences, or independent clauses, that we're separating by a fanboy. Now we've talked about you can't go to college and say, oh yeah, my 7th grade teacher taught me about fanboys, because they'll think you're crazy. The correct grammatical term for that is coordinating conjunction. But this helps us remember that for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so are the most common coordinating conjunctions that we could use to combine two ideas together. My biggest rule, if I can get you to know this before you leave 7th grade, it will be a huge victory, is that you do not start sentences with your fanboys. Now I know you'll see writing that looks like it in the novels that you're reading that have sentences that start with and or but or so, and I'm not saying that famous writers can't do them, but for 7th graders just learning the proper rules of grammar, I am outlawing it for our classroom. So my example sentence here, Skillet has an amazing female drummer, comma, and she sings amazingly. If you're not sure if your sentence is compound, try reading the first sentence by itself. Skillet has an amazing female drummer. Sounds like a complete idea. Then I'm going to read what I have after the comma. She sings amazingly. Okay, that's another complete thought. I could combine those two sentences together with a comma and then one of my fanboys. And again, we have to be careful with which fanboy we use. It has to be an appropriate one to make sense in the sentence. Okay, which then brings us to a compound sentence with a semicolon. Again, we're looking for two complete sentences. The only difference is, instead of using a comma and a fanboy, all you have to do is put a semicolon. And the biggest mistake I'm seeing in your writing right now, you're doing a great job of applying these semicolons, is that you're still trying to put that and after it, or the but, or the or, and you don't need to. Not only do you not need to, you just cannot. So don't put a comma, a fanboy, or a conjunction with a semicolon. It actually makes it a lot easier for you to write these if you don't. The other thing I'm seeing is that a capital letter after the semicolon. A semicolon is a middle punctuation mark. It's not an end punctuation mark like a period or an exclamation point or a question mark. So it does not get a capital letter after it. So I took that exact same sentence, Skillet has an amazing female drummer, and instead of my comma and, I put a semicolon. She also sings amazingly. I like to say that the semicolon is a good way to show some sophistication in your writing, that you're ready for a challenge and to show that you're improving as a writer. Just something to think about as you're trying to vary your sentence structure.